Continue along with our 68 college basketball previews and the 68 days leading up to the college basketball season, down to the final handful of days, and we are talking all things Houston now with Ryan Monceaux of GoCoogs.com. Ryan, thanks for joining us today, sir. How we doing?
Doing great. How are you, Trevor?
Doing fantastic. Appreciate you taking time to chat with us. I know we're I think less than 3 weeks, a little over 2 weeks away at the time we record this from the college basketball season getting underway. Always kind of start these looking back at last year. Another successful year for the Houston Cougars under head coach Kelvin Sampson. I guess if you could, just kind of in a nutshell, sum up, what the Cougars were able to do last season.
Well, the top of the list is they won the Big 12 and did it by 2 games in their first year in the conference. They went 17-0 at home, and I believe 6-3 in the conference on the road. They won 3 games on the road, 2 in overtime and 1 on a final shot against Texas, Baylor, and Oklahoma down the stretch that really put them in the driver's seat in the conference, and got to beat Kansas in the final regular season game by 35 or so. So it was a great run. You got to the Sweet 16, and your best player, one of the best players in the country last year, Jamal Shead, got injured during the game. And, you take a top 5 player off a team, and they're going to struggle, and U of H did, and lost to a pretty good Duke team.
Yeah, so another successful year under Kelvin Sampson, but maybe not quite the finish that was expected going forward. I guess now looking to this year, what are kind of the general thoughts on what they can do coming into this season?
This is actually a deeper team than they've had in the last few years. They returned 4 starters from a year ago. They lost Jamal Shead to the NBA. And added a point guard from OU, Milos Uzan, and a couple of recruits and red shirts that they expect to really impact this year. They've got a guy coming back who'll come off the bench to start, Joseph Tugler, who is one of the most dynamic players, 4 or 5 combo guys that I've ever seen. There's a lot of expectations, and the schedule is stout, and they're going to get tested early and often. But with the depth that they have, they expect that they could make a deep run in March.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously the loss of Shead is significant, but they return a lot of pieces that were around him, and then they added to this as well, like you mentioned with Milos Uzan. Who is the most intriguing piece or the biggest factor in any success Houston wants to have coming into this year?
Well, they're going to have to meld Uzan into the offense and into the defense. He broke his nose in practice a week or so ago and is kind of out for a bit. He broke it in a collision in a drill with Emmanuel Sharp. Sharp is the most intriguing guy to me. He is the guy that came out of Tampa. He was not heralded as a 4 or 5 star, but was somebody that Kelvin thought he could develop. And last year he started coming on. He's a guard. He's a shooting guard, but he started rebounding really well, playing some better defense. And as his 3-point shooting heated up late in the season, was able to then get to the rack and score that way. I look for him to have a breakout year. He scored 30 in the second round of the NCAA tournament against Texas A&M. Huge 30 that U of H needed, winning that game in overtime. But that's the guy that I look forward to seeing what he can do and provide to this team.
Once again, we're talking all things Houston men's basketball with Ryan Monceaux of GoCoogs.com. Historically under Kelvin Sampson, these have been Houston teams that aren't going to necessarily light up the scoreboard most nights, although I think they did drop 100 in an NCAA tournament game last year. But they're going to be efficient offensively, but they're going to play at a little bit slower tempo. I think they were 360th in tempo last year. what is expected from this Cougars offense this year?
I think you're going to see a faster tempo. They're going to get up and down the floor because they have the guys to do it. Last year, you really only had one point guard for most of the year. And Jamal Shead played a lot of minutes. And, it just can't be that way. He averaged, I think, 32 minutes a game. In the Big 12 conference play, it was certainly higher. It was in the 35-minute range. And to do that in that league against that kind of competition, it just was really difficult. Now I think you're stacked at least too deep at every position, and they expect to get out and run and get up and down the floor. And when you combine that with the tenacious defense, it's going to be a challenge for U of H to achieve that, to be efficient in that way. But it's going to be a real challenge for opposing teams.
And then on the other side, defensively, that's what Kelvin Sampson's programs have prided themselves on. They were number one in defensive efficiency last year. It's tough to be number one again, so I'm not going to ask, are they going to be the best defense in college basketball? But, the expectation is this is once again going to be a pretty dang good defensive team, right?
Yeah. My worry always is about NIL and about guys getting money, and does that change how they go about the more difficult, the less glamorous things in the game? Nobody changed last year. Everybody continued to play their role to fit in the culture. The players do a good job of policing that themselves. So I expect these guys to be as good as they were last year, with the exception of Shead. Shead was in the top 3 defenders in the country last year, certainly the best at the point of attack. Can Uzan be that? Probably not. That's expecting a lot. But if he can be efficient and, even just decent, I think the defense of the other 4 on the floor with him will still make this a really formidable defense.
The AP preseason top 25 came out earlier this week, actually, and Houston was 4th. They were one of 3 Big 12 teams in the top 5. Kansas 1, Iowa State 5. I think the last 5 NCAA tournaments under Kelvin Sampson, this has been a team that's at least made it to the Sweet 16. Is that at the bare minimum the expectation for Houston this year?
I don't know what the real expectation is. I think it would be disappointing if they didn't meet that second weekend. But at the same time, this is a weird conference. It's going to 20 games this year. And, I think it would be difficult to put that expectation on them. At the same time, there's a lot of talent on this team. And if you can get them playing together and surging at the right time. UConn the last 2 years maybe has not been the best team in the regular season, but mid-February to the end, they have been the best team. They've surged at the right time. And U of H has dealt with injuries the last couple of years coming down the stretch. They have to flip that switch. They've got to be surging at the end. If they can do that, then I think an Elite 8 is probably the minimum that you expect. This team is really talented, and you have to think, if injury-wise it goes right, that, this team could conceivably play for the national title.
Is there anything on the surface right now, and this is maybe tough to answer because we haven't seen them on the floor, and they've been really good the last handful of years, but is there anything right now that maybe gives you a little bit of concern or could be a weakness coming into this year?
Just the point guard spot. Just you don't know exactly what you're going to get. He was at OU, and that team was not as good. And the defensive expectations were not there that there are for this program. How does he meld into this? How does he function? And then down low, are you as efficient and effective as you have been? I talked to the starting center, Xavier Francis, this week, and he said he'd been working on his confidence and his aggression. Can he be more aggressive and finish at the hole He's great on defense. He's great blocking shots and rebounding. But can he be better on that offensive end? I think those would be the two things that I would really look for this year.
Once again, Ryan Monceaux talking all things Houston men's basketball with GoCoogs.com. Ryan, we really appreciate the time today, sir. Thank you, and enjoy the upcoming basketball season.
Thank you, Trevor.